Lynn, we are here and I am seeing people joining us in the room right now. I see Christopher Rice. I see Elisa, Craig, Aaron Griffin, Haley Jones. Welcome, 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 everybody. If you are just joining us, go into your chat window and tell us where you're coming from. We want to know, where are you coming from today? I see Jeff and Jacob and James, multiple Jeffs. We see Jen Owens. We see Jennifer Yakola. We see John, Joseph Meyer. You guys, tell us where you're coming from. We're so excited you're here. Lynn is chatting in. She's there from the Keweenaw Peninsula with the most UP background for a Zoom screen I've ever seen, Lynn. You're so appropriate today. And we have folks joining in from all over the country. Here we go. Arkansas, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Victoria, BC. Good work, Canada, representing. We got Grand Rapids, Washington State, Chicago, Brooklyn. What's up, Craig? Kingston, New York, Lancaster, PA, Durham, North Carolina. This is so fun. Lynn,
Love,
you
love
have
this.
people from all over the country
People.
here to hear about real estate strategies because you're the pro. And I cannot wait to dive in with everybody. If you are joining and I've just said your name and you're like, oh goodness, my dog's barking behind me. I still have my PJs on and I didn't get ready for this. Don't worry, we can't see you. You can only see us, and we can see that you are here. And our goal in these meetings is always to make an interactive discussion. This is around the coffee table. I got my coffee here. Lynn and I are ready, and we want to be discussing with you. So at multiple points during the discussion today, this isn't just going to be watch, sit back, listen. It's going to be lean forward, dig in with us, and ask questions and be a part of the discussion. Lynn, you are one of my favorite conversationalists. You're one of my favorite business owners. You're one of my favorite Youpers. People from the UP of Michigan get called Youpers if you don't know, if you're joining from somewhere else. And
I have to correct you on that one. You're close, but not quite. So
okay.
a Yooper is technically someone who was born in the Upper Peninsula. So
not just there, born.
Not just there. No, you will actually get quite a bit of flack if you try to tell someone that is a Yooper as someone that's not a Yooper that you have this heritage. So I like to joke, since I'm from Lower Michigan, I saw some Grand Rapids, saw some other Lower Michigan folks in there. Excited to see you. I am a troll. This is a whole Michigan thing. I don't know if this is the way to start, but I am actually a troll. I live below, or grew up below, the Mackinac Bridge, but I married a Yooper. So technically, I think this makes me a trooper.
I like that. That's so
Right?
good. That's so good. You guys,
more ways than one.
you guys just dove into Michigan dialect and culture all in one. And it comes with birthright of where you are from. So glad.
But I do agree with Chris. He just chatted. I think you should be able to claim Yooper if you have boiled a deer skull, which I fully agree with, and it might sound a little morbid and obtuse, but there is actually a very famous deer skull boiling business that's just up the road from where we are in the Keweenaw. Sounds morbid and terrible. I'm painting a terrible picture, but look, it's a beautiful place behind me. We just also have people that boil deer skulls occasionally. Not weird.
I love it. I love it. We're 4 minutes in and people are so glued to the screen wanting to know, what are they talking about? This is wild. I was here for the real estate strategies. Don't worry, you guys. Real estate strategies are coming. That is our topic today, is diving into, how do I find my location for my business? How do I work through the process of getting that property, leasing land, buying the building, all the things? And you're going to hear from Lynn, somebody who's done that at, oh my goodness, we're going to start listing off all the properties. Lynn, just to highlight and toot your horn for a minute, you guys are here with Lynn Makela. Lynn is one of the founders of Takka Saunas in the UP in multiple locations. Fresh Coast Cabins, you're going to hear about her hospitality business there. True North Cabin, the one that started it all. And now Small Craft Advisory, a wonderful craft cocktail bar, brewery / event center. I was just hearing this morning, wedding events. You continue to add things to the broader portfolio of businesses that are sort of all tied to this love of place. And so we are going to get to sort of dig in with you today and dig in with everybody about, what is it like to be, one, a business owner, two, somebody who's had to find those properties and bring them to life again. So Lynn, just such an honor to be with you here. Thank you for joining us from above the bridge in the UP of Michigan. So glad to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Justin. It's an honor to be here and be sharing with all of you. It feels a little crazy to hear that intro, even though that's stuff that we've done. It still feels like I'm remembering. It's been a whirlwind since we've started, and super excited to share how we got there with everyone that's interested in learning more today. And thank you for the platform and the amazing partnership that we've developed over the last few years, starting in 2020 when I showed you actually the spot and said it needed to have a sauna. That was part of the intention today. Was needed, and we've built great things together. So super stoked to be here. Thanks.
So you guys, we want to hear who's in the room now. We've seen a little bit where you're from, but we also want to know a little bit more about you. And back to our interactive room, Lindsay's going to send over a poll, and that is going to be just hearing a little bit of who you are. We got tons of folks in the room from all over the country. We want to know, in what ways are you interested in the business of sauna? Are you somebody who is here who's a supporter and enthusiast? You just love this practice and you're like, oh my God, I hear Lynn doing this thing up in Upper Michigan. I want to go hear more and join her sometime. Maybe you're somebody who's in the process of thinking about starting a sauna business in some way, shape, or form. You are kind of in process of planning, designing, starting to open your doors. Maybe you're in that discernment mode. Or you're somebody who is actively running one. Doors are open and you're like, these two people are crazy enough to do it. I want to learn next to them and see what mistakes they've made so I don't have to make them. We're so glad you're here if you're here as well. We got a bunch of you folks dialing in there, hitting that chat button, hitting the poll or where you're at. And we still, like I was saying, we have folks here from all over the place. I'm seeing more Pittsburgh, PA, more Connecticut, South Dakota, more Wisconsin. We have Dublin, Ireland. So excited about that. Truckee, California, Boise. So all over the place today. And when we share our results here, we got folks kind of from all over. We got a few of you enthusiasts. We're so glad you're in the room, about 6%. Over half of you in the room, 58%, almost 60%, Lynn, are folks who are thinking about starting the sauna business. And so if that's you, you're going to learn from Lynn, somebody who has dove head over heels into this business, and you're going to hear the ups and downs of it. And then also we have folks, over a third of you, 36%, who are running one currently. So amazing. Feel free, if you have opened the doors, feel free to drop a link in the chat. We're excited to hear more of that. We'd love to go check out your businesses. All right, Lynn, let's dig in. I want to hear from the jump how the heck you got here, how you went in and you started this journey. I'll give one little preamble. You and your husband, Jason, are two really amazing people that I've got to know over these last 5 years together. And he is a literal rocket scientist. The dude, like, in a very real way, is an engineer who's done rocket propulsion for a big part of his career. And you are just this like amazing, badass, professional corporate marketing woman who knows how to tell a story and knows how to get people excited and cast a vision. And you decided, let's move back to our hometowns and the lands roughly where we grew up. I want to hear a little bit about how that process started before we get into how to find the right piece of real estate for your business. Give us the origin story for you and Jason and what you've really done here.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. It is. It's been a wild ride, right? I feel like when you go through that list of things of all the businesses with Smallcraft and with Takka and with True North and Fresh Coast, it feels unreal because that sounds like such a lot. And we started, I think, just like your average like couple of college kids, fell in love at the Keweenaw Brewing Company right down the road from where I am right now. Decided we should chase our careers after we got out of college, right? Wanted to do the corporate marketing thing. Did that for a few years. Decided that Seattle and the Pacific Northwest are beautiful places, but maybe a little busier than we were ready to commit to for a long term. And when the opportunity came for Jason to take that rocket science experience and knowledge back to Houghton Hancock, we wanted to do that right away. So came back after about a 5 or 6 year stint and started to think about like, wow, we love being in the UP. I'm so glad we moved back, but we still want to get a little further off the grid. I want to be able to go out on a weekend and have a really long hike or bike or ski. And so we started looking for places that we could do that. And that kind of led us to that very first spot that we identified on our map as like an area that we wanted to spend more time in. Our cabin, True North Cabin, cabin really started as just a destination for us to be able to get away from the busy life of Houghton and Hancock. Mind you, if you aren't familiar with the Q&A, this is like 20,000 people max. So that's probably really excessive, including all the students that are in the area and they leave in the summer. So it's a smallish area when it comes down to locals, and where we had moved from Seattle. So having that ability to come back, find that cabin really kind of started it all for us and got us really excited about the idea of renovating and remodeling on the weekends. It was a hobby. It was a pastime. It was something we really enjoyed doing together. And then we realized we could rent it out on Airbnb, share that experience with other people, share the development. And that really started to create other sparks in us that led to all of those crazy things. But it really was as easy as that. I think it's really easy to look at that list of businesses and community things that we've done and say, wow, that's a lot. I don't know how you do that, but it started with a very small cabin and look at over Lake Superior. Yeah, look at over Lake Superior, just to being able to share that with our friends and family and with a few others, and went nuts from there. Does that help? Is that the context?
It totally is the context. And, I think some folks, as they're starting these businesses, they sometimes have a small vision that they want to grow and cultivate, or they have a huge vision that they don't know how to get to. And I think I experience you guys as a little bit of both. You like have a lot of vision, but you're so practical in the day to day of how we got here or are getting here. Maybe I think you're also a humble Midwesterner who doesn't like to sort of like. You also have some amazing businesses that you're running, and it started with this one cabin. It started with this chance to say, how do we de-risk buying a cabin? Well, maybe we can rent it out. And your marketing prowess said, this is amazing. Now, I know a lot of these properties were also not the perfect, beautiful, well-refined, curated experience before you got there. And so I want to sort of ask a little bit about that, Lynn, is this kind of do-it-yourself bootstrap remodeler background that you guys have. And we're going to get, as we go into the depths of our conversation, really practical on the sort of real estate side. But I'm going to show some photos. I'm going to show some of what you guys have done. I'm going to show some website stuff that's just going to like knock people's socks off because of how beautiful it is. And I want you to open the hood for us and say, also, it was a little tough. We walked in and it wasn't like that day one. Talk a little bit about this process of taking things and having vision, starting small, but also it being rough at the beginning, right? People want to know the honest side of it. Can you take us there of the process of, True North or Fresh Coast at the very, very beginnings?
Yeah, I mean, in the very sense of like we had that little experience with True North. We remodeled it, took us 2 winters, had a great time with it. We're able to host people and start to evolve that into an actual business, right? Like our first attempt at Airbnb hosting and using real estate in that way. And so we got a little confident, when we think about being bootstrappy, we bootstrapped the crap out of it and we felt pretty good about what we did. So we found Fresh Coast just up the road. It's actually 2 miles away from True North Cabin. And it started as a very rundown resort that was currently operating, but it was past due for needing a little bit of love. And when we found that, we essentially did what I think anybody with an idea does. You just dream about it. You dream about it maybe for too long, and then you try to put pen to paper to see if it makes sense. And we went right to the bank with our pro forma of like how do we make a pro forma? Googled that online, like tried to figure out how we could prepare and see. And we had this great data from our cabin, and the banker pretty much laughed at us. We showed him like this, here's our spreadsheet of what we did, here's what we can do. And he's like, you guys know that like one cabin is not running a hospitality business. And we were like, isn't it? Like, are you sure? Because I mean, maybe, but we didn't know. And that banker is a really good friend, still supports all of our businesses today. And we often laugh about that moment where we came in kind of wide eyed, like, please give us money to do this. By the way, like TBD or like a moment with that. It was right in 2019. So it was like January of December. We found this spot. We were going to the bank in early 2020 before everything happened, starting to grease the skids, not knowing that COVID was imminent. And then went back to the banker in a couple of weeks and said, hey, this is still our plan, still our business. What can we do to convince you to give us this loan, to buy this property, to want to build out this vision? And that was a really hard conversation. And we had to be really scrappy about how we approached that, be really conservative, find and figure out some ways that we could prove our value to this banker so that he was willing to say yes, give us the stamp of approval, and essentially give us enough of a mortgage in order to attempt that process. And that was, yeah, looking back at that now, that was a really scary moment, but it also, gave us a lot of excitement around what we were ready to do, but we also had to scale everything back. We went into that project and that vision with a plan to really transform things, and it was desperately needed. Each of the cabins were pretty run down. They probably hadn't had renovation in at least 20 years, some of them 30 or 40 years. And so basic maintenance was even missing. And so there was a lot of work, and that was all factored into our plan, and something that we really had to convince the bank that we're willing to bet on ourselves, and that they should be willing to bet on us too, in order to take that leap. And yeah, it worked out. Is that too much, too little? Oh yeah, look at that little spot.
So here's the start. I mean, gorgeous True North cabin. This is you saying, yep, we can do this thing. We can make this happen. Here's what you've created. You're in a spot now where today you're in Outside Magazine, Travel and Leisure. You're all over with these beautiful cabins, and people are coming all the time at this beautiful sort of end of the earth moment. And if I can share the under the hood with everybody, I love these pictures that you were pulling up today. This was the start. This was the moment when you pulled up, you said, I think we can turn that into the future tourism destination. For folks who are listening in and folks who are along, I want to hear all your questions, but if there are any about this, like, what did it feel like? How did you start? Any of those early moments of being a visionary who can see a thing that doesn't exist yet? Lynn, you guys had to walk into this place and say, I think we can make that something. Now, over the years, you sure have. And we met for the first time when you were in the middle of renovating this space. I remember walking in, and there was drywall still being put up and details still being done. And I could see where it was going. You had done a lot of the work. But can you talk a little bit about the feeling of betting on yourself and the feeling of also having to prove that and cast that vision to like so many stakeholders, bankers, community members, your spouse, probably your family, that are thinking these guys are crazy right now? Talk a little bit about that vision casting, bringing a thing into the world.
Yeah, it was even from the very beginning, talking to the realtor. So it was a really wonderful and unique situation when we were trying to buy the lodge property, the Eagle Lodge property. The commercial realtor, was very good friends with the seller, and he was almost trying to protect her. She'd gone down the road of people trying to buy it before, and because of its condition, like you saw, it was a really hard sell. And so we even had to convince him, and he recommended or required that we go on a tour of the property before he'd even share any of the data and the financials for us to figure out how we would make it work. So from the very beginning, we were working on setting that stage, creating that relationship, showing up and showing that we were competent and capable of getting the deal done. And then, ultimately taking it to what we wanted it to be a really useful asset and resource for everyone to enjoy in our community. And I think that was, there was like no amount of preparation. It all was just like something that happened day by day, right? You got a question about how we were going to do this, and then we worked on a thoughtful response, and we worked with the banker on that. We worked with the realtor on that, and we created these opportunities to show more of that. And it involved, working on renderings, creating ways to cast that vision a little bit more so that we could share what was in our minds, as well as get more comfortable with what we were doing. I mean, we walked in and saw it, and we were like, wow, are we willing to commit blood, sweat, tears, days, mornings, noons, nights to this? Like, this is a really big project. And I think it took a lot of soul searching in that way too, just to make sure that we were ready. And I think my lovely husband and I are unfortunately silly enough to try anything once and figure it out. Thank goodness, because it's worked out so far. That, like, back to that idea, Justin, of like betting on what you know and what you can do. And it wasn't just us either. It was our friends. It was our family. My husband's family is amazing. He was kind of raised with this very much I can do this. I can figure it out and do it well. And that really served us well. I mean, I feel like Jason's parents are, if there was a general contractor parenting license, they would have it. They help us with so much, and they really do it all. We couldn't have done it without them, and without the host of other like contractors, people that we met throughout the way when we need to figure out projects that we wanted to do.
And in some sense, there's this when you cast the vision, you're betting on yourself, but you're also building a team. You're saying who are the people that also believe in that vision, and the larger the vision is, the bigger that team needs to be, and the bigger the dollar amount is for the property and the build out, the more you need more stakeholders to believe at a high level that you're going to be able to get this done. And you guys have been through this story now over the past 5 years plus, starting with one cabin, moving to 9 cabins, is it, at Fresh Coast and multiple buildings. And then we're going to talk for a little bit after this about Takka Portage and kind of this piece of land that was going to fall into the canal and it wasn't going to get used well, that you also had this. But before we get there, there are some good questions coming in. And I want to just take this moment. This is the around the coffee table moment here for everybody. Drew's saying, "Wow, amazing vision to reality, super inspirational." I can't. You're absolutely right, Drew. Maddie's asking, how much of the original structures remain? So talk a little bit about the DIY process for Fresh Coast cabins. Did you raise it all and build a new? Are there old logs in those old cabins that still remain? And talk a little bit about keeping the nostalgia of the place.
Yeah, that was a super good question. That was actually our original plan when we bought the property right as COVID was, before we knew what COVID was, before we knew what the word COVID was. We had a plan to partner with another local, semi-local regional firm in order to take down all of the cabins and build everything new, thinking that we'd have brand new everything, electrical, water, not have to worry about foundations, not have to worry about roofs, and not have to resurface these cabins that you saw the condition they were in, not so awesome. That was our original plan. COVID changed everything. So we pivoted out of the gate in order to focus on more of a renovation approach. And that was what we did. In the picture that you saw of the lodge, that we did remove the roof, but the rest of the structure is the same, with the exception of the old owner put a lot of weird additions on that we didn't think made sense. There was literally a door that went to nowhere off the upstairs. There was a door went into like some weird closet, and then that had another door sided over that went out onto the roof, which was a slanted roof. Didn't even make sense. So we did remove some of those pieces that didn't make sense. We were definitely trying to simplify what had just been added onto for over 100 years. We estimate that that building was probably built in the 1920s, and it was super solid. We had intended to do more renovation, but we were so impressed with the beams and the style of the build that we were able to salvage so much of the interior stuff. And we actually repurposed a lot of the materials on the property. So when we redid cabin 8, we did a similar approach. We took everything down out of the inside, changed the roof line, and used all of the windows from the lodge that we had replaced. And so we did a lot of repurposing and working on that construction plan as we went. It was not a new build of sorts, even though that was what we originally thought we were going to do. But we're super glad we didn't, because if we had done that, we would have been financially in a lot bigger payment and risk position than we ended up being when we could be a little bit more scrappy, as well as bring money in to fund future renovation.
So there's a couple questions here that are around that financial lift and the both the risk, the difficulty it takes to get there. Your guys' story has been one of continually doing bigger deals from my vantage point, right? And you kind of said that as like, yep, we started a little bit more safe. We always could rent out the cabin and we'd have a cabin. Worst case scenario, we sell the cabin. Worst case scenario, when you're building 9 cabins, that's a different thing. When you're building the new businesses that you've done, it's another layer up. Peter's asking, curious about the loan process. Did you go mortgage? Did you get them paid for upgrades out of pocket? How'd you do the renovation for the commercial loan? And then Catherine, kind of a similar question. I feel like my biggest challenge is to convince the bank to see the vision and to get the funds to support this financially. Before we get into the details of loans and mortgages, I want to start with Catherine's comment here. And vision is absolutely part of it, Catherine. And I would argue that you need to have vision that is tailored to your audience. And if it's bankers, that has to be clear vision and clear numbers. They need to see that, and it needs to be backed up. When we started, my story around this is I kept telling people Cedar and Stone is real. And my wife Gretchen said, "Hey, you keep talking about it like it's real. I need to see some numbers." this needs to come with details around it, and it can't just be story and excitement. Lynn, what was the way in which you've gone about casting vision for each of these properties, also to yourselves so that you're confident enough that, hey, we can do it? And then also to all these outside constituents that need a little bit different type of information. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that vision casting as a tool for an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it is probably like more than you want. It's almost like marriage counseling too. So I got super lucky that my partner in life, who is amazing, happens to be the perfect like process, number, organized engineer brain. Love you, babe. I see you over there. Who is able to tailor and take that conversation and make that happen for the different stakeholders and all of our different partners. So it's always an interesting balance, right? You think of the banker, right? They want to be able to see and have the confidence in our financials, and that's our personal financials, you know, especially at the very beginning with Fresh Coast. That was our personal financials that we were looking at and showing, and then creating detailed pro formas and plans. And I like Peter's question too. We did go for a commercial loan to start this process, but we went to just to cover, and with a little bit of, you know, sweat equity and additional like money that we were bringing in to operate the business. So we were able to get a commercial loan mortgage for that first year, and it was in that second year when we were like, look what we did with on a bootstring, you know, really scrappy budget. Like we're here really making this happen. Look what we were able to do in just 1 year. And that was actually the justification that the bank needed to see that we had potential with what we were doing, to be able to understand the bigger vision. That's when we went back and I got to bring my marketing brain and my renderings. You know, Jason was working on renderings. We were both working on like what this design could look like, and we both get really excited and nerdy about that stuff. So that helps, right? If two people that are crazy enough to be nerdy about the same things, that definitely helped us in terms of creating that vision for the multiple stakeholders. And that banker needed both, right? And he also needed a year of data for us to be able to prove that we were able to support that loan that we were able to go back and get. So we did get the construction loan to do that big project that Justin showed earlier. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without that. That was a necessary influx of funds. And that project was just so large. That was our first, I would call it, first big project that we were able to take on and then show the value of at the end. Because now we have data that shows that's our best rental on the property, that rents for the highest amount per night. And so we've been able to take that story and then extend it further for every project that we've gone through.
Yeah,
Did I get all that?
and
That was a lot.
no, that's it. We need to get to that level of detail around this. And I think that that ability to sort of say, yep, we're going to take a step and we're going to prove. And as you begin, the proof is really like, let's see what we've done in the past. And oftentimes, unless you have an angel investor who's like, here's all the money, go run, you really do have to sort of take some measured decisions in how to do this. And I think you guys have done that beautifully. And also, I'm sure it's been hard along the way to sort of have to put blood, sweat, and tears in. You guys sort of like it, but I think it's good for people to hear what skill sets you both need. And then also to be really honest about what are the skill sets we don't have, right? And some people are going to be able to, and maybe have to say, we need to hire contractors for every bit of the remodel for a number of reasons, whether it's they don't have the skill, they don't have the time, they don't have the, you know, they're not in that place where they can do that. You guys were doing this on nights and weekends at a few different points, I know, outside of the day jobs, outside of the sort of normal work. When I think about the impact of that, people sometimes just see a nice shiny Instagram page or you on Pure Michigan, you know, tourism side of things are like, wow, they've done it. And I would say that's hundreds of hours, thousands of hours behind that to really, really, really make that work. Um, would you say, Lynn, let's go into a little bit of kind of detail there. What does it mean to do this as you were beginning and still, and maybe this is still the case, hold other jobs, right? How do we balance the day-to-day, the usual 9 to 5 type work and building a business on the side, building the vision on the side? Can you talk a little bit about that balance between both you and your jobs, and then maybe you and Jason doing this together, right? When people are building their teams for their vision, sometimes they say, I'm quitting the job and I'm going for it. And they have to. Sometimes they say, I got to juggle a lot of things before I do that. Talk about how you balance those things.
Totally. Yeah. So when we moved back from Seattle, I was able to bring a remote job. Before that was cool, right? Before COVID made it cool. And so there was a little bit of flexibility that I got to bring to a job. And my job was full time, but 32 hours a week. It wasn't a 40-hour a week job. I was in a business development role. And so I was able to do consulting and that on the side, right? While my husband was very focused on his startup in town and 60 miles away from where this was. So he always says he became kind of the handyman husband on the weekends, and we were working together on the strategy. But when he got up there was like, here's the list we need to knock out, right? These are the things we need to get done. But I do think having that, obviously that anchor, right? When we go to the bank and we talk about our situation, when we went to buy and renovate that property, we both had very great, stable W-2 jobs that we were able to also leverage as part of that conversation, and be willing to, be a better risk from the bank size. But in terms of how that actually manifested, I was able to work remotely, be up there. If there were contractors, if there were people on site, I could take a few minutes or have time in my day to network or speak with them about what was going on. In that first year, that kind of critical year when we were trying to prove out the concept and we really weren't sure what we were going to see. We had ideas, we had hopes, but we didn't know what was going to happen. We took a couple of really long weekends for that first month. Essentially, we closed on the property in March of in May of 2020. So we did about 4 months of due diligence on the property, 4 months of trying to convince the bank that we were a good, safe risk while the world was shut down. I don't know how we did this yet. I think that was a little bit of magic luck. I don't know, universe, divine intervention. I'm not sure. That was still crazy to me. But they said yes. And we had to completely pivot our plan because our agreements with the contractors that we were working with to partner on that deal, they were now all in their own world of we can't support you. We've already lost 3 months of business because we've all been shut down. Nobody can do anything. We've lost that partnership. So we said, all right, we're going to pull up our bootstrings and put some paint on things and fix electrical and run these ourselves for the summer. And so that kind of critical time, I was spending a lot of time up north while making sure that those things could happen. We devoted long weekends to doing that first push. And then we're able to open in July 4th. It was the 4th of July weekend for 2020 as a very small version of what you see. The pictures that you see today are not what they were then, but they were good, clean cabins. They were safe and people needed that. It was also maybe a part of where we were in time as a culture of just I want to get out of my house. I want to be somewhere where I don't have to see other people. And we were at the time had no foresight at this. We were the perfect spot, being very far away, not shared. You could come and go as you please. We were still, within COVID cleaning policies and being able to recognize the 6-foot rule. Remember that? When that was a thing. And being able to do all of those things. We were ultimately the perfect spot for people to do that. And so that really had that impact of being able to do that while I was working, my job, while my husband was able to come up and support that as often, oftentimes after work, he would be up there too. It was definitely a big commitment that first year before we got to that team. But also to your point, Justin, finding the right people. Our contractor from the very beginning. Do we have time for this story? It's kind of ridiculous.
We do.
We lived right next door to an empty lot, and we had never met the owner at the time. But during COVID, the first week of the shutdown, my husband walked out to the mailbox and met the owner, who was maybe, I don't know why he was there. He was coming to check on things, but they struck up a 10-foot apart conversation because COVID. And Jason, they were just talking about how odd the situation was and the potential impacts of what we were looking at in March and in April. And he said, "Well, I'm really screwed. I just left my job and started a construction company, and nobody wants contractors in their home." And Jason said, "I just bought a resort and nobody is going to want to leave their house." And so it became the perfect marriage of opportunity. We pretty much started working with him that minute and haven't stopped pretty much since in all of our projects. He's been a huge partner and one that the timing worked out so perfectly, and we never would have been able to do it without him, as well as many other people. But in terms of getting that first year up and running, those were some of the critical paths and how we were balancing it from a work perspective and a job perspective. Oh, you're
So
on mute.
great, so helpful to kind of basically get really honest about this was a thing that was hard in the hardest of times in this sort of unknown. And I think that feeling also doesn't go away when people are starting. So if you're listening in and you're like, this seems ridiculous and bonkers what I'm trying to do here and how I'm trying to build this, it always feels risky at each stage, and that is okay. And as an entrepreneur, you're sort of continually going to get used to, all right, I'm running hurdles. I'm going to get back to another spot. There's going to be another hurdle in front of me. I want to get to, Lynn, some of these hurdles specifically around real estate, making decisions for real estate, how to do that. I want to, before we get there really quick, there's some good questions in here that are about cash flow and startup funds and some of those things. I'm going to mention a couple things, and then Lynn, I want your take on it. So Drew, you asked a question. I'm wondering how lean of a lean startup is too lean. I have seen a number of mobile sauna businesses popping up. I'm weighing the risks and benefits of starting with brick and mortar versus entirely mobile. Curious to know your thoughts. Great question, Drew. We have a whole webinar on it. We have a whole webinar, whole hour plus to really dive into, and the link is in there. I'd love for you to go check it out because it really maps out the different models people are doing around North America right now. Mobile is the most lean startup. It also has the lowest revenue generation capacity and a really high labor cost. And so just thinking about how those things work out, there are some folks that they want to go super scrappy and lean and prove the model to begin with. And then some folks can go a little harder at the beginning because they really believe in what's happening and they've done the research. Either way, you got to run a bunch of numbers. And there's multiple questions about cash flow. And Lynn, I'd be interested to hear your takes on this because you guys were up and running in a couple of spots and also needed to totally do a construction project in most of these. How did you manage cash flow? How are you managing cash flow as a business as it relates to sort of getting these new properties up off the ground? And then I want to move to real estate deep dive.
Yeah, definitely. I think that question kind of comes back to even that first year, right? We had to understand for ourselves what the numbers were going to be when we got started. And then we went back and used those projections. So we essentially didn't do much active construction when we were actively renting out Fresh Coast, for example. And then we're able to use that data and justify the cost of a construction loan, figuring that into what we could reasonably raise the rates after we had made some improvements, and doing that mental math in order to justify and really take some bets, some risks in terms of what we were able to put money into. And I would say that doesn't also result in just building things, right? My background in marketing makes me want to show up the same way that we do on site online. And so not only were we thinking about what we were building out from a cabin experience perspective, we wanted that experience to feel good so that when you go to the website, you do feel like you've got someone that's thoughtfully thinking about the experience that they've designed for you. And that is also quite costly. So we were looking at all of those factors and really bootstrapping it. We started with a $5,000 website. I now have more money in my website probably than I do in some of my cabin renovations, and certainly than in some of my saunas. So it's like, it's a cash flow game of figuring out what justifies it and trying to do it in an approach that you're not laying out too much upfront to not be able to realize the possibilities as you get down the road with your business.
And Lynn, it doesn't hurt that you're quoted in the New York Times and you have
Hurt.
that right on the website, right? And you have these beautiful locations. The website is in so many ways the front door to your experience because people are going to see that. Your social is another extension of that. So you know that it isn't just about what is the brick and mortar of the space. It is how do we tell people. And so those are very real costs. And you, with a background in marketing, with a background that cares about design. I mean, you guys have just done such a great job of telling this story, which is in the water of the UP of Michigan, but now is being told to a broader community than just you guys and just the folks who are growing up around there. So let's talk for a little bit as we shift gears here. I want to get really nitty gritty about real estate, and I want to get nitty gritty about how to make those decisions. I want to hear the roadblocks you ran into. And if you have questions, you guys, there's some coming in. Jacob, we're going to hit your question. I see it right there. But Lynn, just start us off. How did you think about beginning to make these choices? And maybe it's also a chance to tell the story of the new property and what's been developing over the last year. We've talked a lot now about cabins way up. And then there's been now this new double down on you guys and double down on your hometown with the new property. So bring us up to speed there, and then let's get into the nuts and bolts of real estate.
Yeah. So from the moment that we had Fresh Coast, we wanted a sauna on the property. So Jason's Finnish, last name is Makela. Like we are, it is in our history, our family history. And so Jason grew up in the sauna. He knew that was a part of something that we wanted to build on the lake because there's no better place. And I think part of that tie really made Takka Superior, which you see behind me, the perfect spot to launch a sauna business. And we started with an amenity, right? I don't think fully realized what we could do with a sauna experience until we talked to Justin. I was like, oh yeah, people will love enjoying the sauna as a cabin guest. And so it was not in my heart and mind at the moment that we started to be sauna entrepreneurs. That actually, it wasn't even in my mind to be a cabin or a real estate entrepreneur. This just all has kind of grown out of seeing an opportunity, wanting to make something really cool and hoping that other people saw how cool it was and would pay us money to do it. Right. So that was the start of Takka Superior. And after like lots of conversations with Justin, going through that process and launching Takka Superior, we realized that there was opportunity there and that we could do more. We could do it in a different way. And that brought us back to, okay, we've done some work at Fresh Coast. We started to think about what we wanted to do next from a development standpoint, from a how can we have this impact that maybe we don't know that we want to have, but we're working on. And part of that came from, we love hosting guests. Like we had so much fun hosting people on Lake Superior, letting people from the city, from Chicago, from Detroit, from Minneapolis, experience the quiet that is Lake Superior or the roar that is the waves, and going into the sauna for the first time and being able to cold plunge and have them come up shrieking like hyenas because they're just like so excited and exuberated. And it was incredible. That drove us. And so we started to think about, wow, we're really good at hosting guests. Like we're good at that. What else could we do? How could we make an impact for our locals? Like I want it to be a cool place that my friends like, that our community loves. Like what could we do next? And so that framed up our idea for a new project. And we started reaching out to, we live in Hancock. We've lived in Hancock the entire time that we have been back. And so Hancock's very near and dear to us. It was going through some really tumultuous things. One of them was selling off Finlandia University, which as a fellow Finn, Justin, I know hurts you, but unfortunately they had to close down this private college, and it left a lot of buildings vacant without a home. And so that started to like bring ideas to us. Okay, where could we do this? Started running numbers, starting to think about what we could even do. We didn't know what this was. Could we renovate a building that would be attractive enough that people would want to do something in it? And we knew that we had the success of Takka Superior. We were starting to see the success from that, and we thought, okay, sauna could be it, right? Like we could take that and continue to build out that, make it more of a community-based experience. And the more that we looked at different properties, we were really focused on one in particular that came up after the Finlandia buildings had closed. But we had been doing a lot of talking to our local city council. Michigan has a group called the MEDC, which is a funding source that provides funding for developers in rural areas that are in need of rehab. And so we started talking to all these people just to try to see who had ideas of what we might be able to do, where we could bring sauna, what would make sense. And that led us to the property that we found. I guess it was a year and a half ago now, 18 months ago, down in Hancock on the Portage Canal. Does that catch us up? Now you want?
That catches us up. So if you haven't been to Hancock, Michigan, or Houghton, Hancock, it is these beautiful little cities built on a canal with this bridge and multiple bridges, but this big lift bridge that ties them. And you guys found this piece of land that was kind of, it was sort of formerly, there's parks around it, it's on the water, there's connection, and it was sort of being totally underutilized. How did you make the decision to say, wait, this is the one, not the university buildings? Here's the spot where we got to go and dump buckets of water over everybody's head and have them jump in the water and get in saunas. Can you work us through a little bit of that real estate decision making as you started sketching pro formas? Not just do we walk on the land and does it feel good? What were the nitty gritty that Jason said? Wait, I want to see square footage. I want to see numbers. Can you walk through a little bit of that?
Yes, yeah, we did a lot of soul searching as well as property searching when we were doing this. So yeah, it was numbers, but it was also like walking the spaces, trying to feel like how they could actually move and how they could be transformed and what kind of investment that would take and how we could get that investment in order to make it possible. Because I knew if we were going to take on a college building or something very large, we would have to figure out a new financing structure. While the cabins were doing good, we're still working full time and trying to figure out how this works in a way that we can do it effectively for our lives. Even though we're passionate about it, we weren't quite to the point where we could make that leap. And so we started walking the Finlandia properties. They were a lot. They are just square footage wise, just very, very big. And so when the waterfront property came up and we were evaluating that and a few others, it made so much sense to us. Like that was the location, but it was a super high price tag. And so a lot of people in our community looked at it and were like, that's overpriced. Like, what are we going to do? How could we ever, like, who could ever buy that? And it was formerly a restaurant. And there's a couple of nuances with that property in that it's almost an acre. So it is a wide, it's like 0.8 acre, I think. So it's a wide parcel on the canal. It had two buildings on it and a pavilion. The main building that everyone thinks of when they think of that property used to be a restaurant and a private gym. And so the previous owner that had listed it for sale had started renovating it. He had taken it down. He was a restaurateur in our area and he wanted to blow it up and make a huge commercial kitchen and be able to do events and a restaurant space there and make it a really, I mean, a beautiful spot for a waterfront restaurant. Don't get me wrong. He nailed it. However, he bought it during COVID. He was building that renovation during the time when we saw all of those material costs go through the roof. And at the same time, had some personal things going on. He ended up moving to Alaska and had things that just pulled him away from that project. And I don't think it became his passion anymore. That's why it went on the market. So when it was on the market, it wasn't something that was turnkey. Nothing was turnkey about it. It was not even drywalled, not even taped out. And so everyone looked at it and they're like, that's way too much money for a spot you can't even move into. And that I'd have to dump, minimum of $150,000, $250,000 in to even make something. And so that quickly became the factors to overcome, but we love a challenge. So when we looked at the property, we started to think about multiple ways that we could bring revenue sources. And that's where it got into my husband's happy place of multiple income streams, what we could do on the property. And so while some were evaluating it and looking at it and seeing a really high price tag and that single building that still needed to be renovated, we were like, okay, what could we do with this gross garage over here? That doesn't really make much sense. Could we put saunas in front of it? Could we make that a usable commercial space, at least short term, for something while we planned something else? What could we do with the pavilion? How could that be an income stream? What could we do to bootstrap those two things in order to finish the build out on that main building? Or how could we seek investment in order to make some of this a little bit easier and not be something that we were financing fully ourselves? And those were the types of questions and exercises that we went through over that course of time in order to kind of talk ourselves into the next crazy idea. And at the same time, we were doing that same thing that I mentioned before. We were meeting with officials. We were talking. I called Justin immediately. I was like, hi, if I bought a property, could we put saunas on it real fast? Because we also knew that this high mortgage was going to come with a high monthly payment and what that was going to look like. And so we started working on partnerships, talking to people, talking to our banker about what kind of financing terms we could seek for something like this. And we never would have been able to do this without the experience that we had and what we had been able to build at Fresh Coast to kind of create the map to show people that we could take this on, even though it was a little bit different, even though the costs were higher. And that was some of the framework that we had to lay to even get to the point where we could put the numbers together to make that project close.
There is so many insights in there, you guys. I hope you are taking notes. This will be recorded. Go back and listen to how Lynn's talking about these things. And it's the ways in which you're sort of, one, counting the costs, two, building a business model that works, short, medium, and long term, and three, who are all the partners that you need to sort of make this thing real and happen. There's some questions that I'm going to get to, and they're starting to bubble up. One of which that I'm just immediately thinking, Lynn, is who did you have on your side for this? Did you have a broker or a real estate agent, a commercial real estate agent? Did you have people that were also helping you think about this? Other than you and Jason, right? Your team. Who were those other people giving you feedback and wisdom? Is this a good idea? How do I think about these questions for, at this time, it was a big next step. It was another step. in depth and complexity? Who are those people on your team?
Yeah, good question. We definitely did some education around real estate development and what our lives were going to look like if we were going to be real estate developers. And I don't even know what that word means. I still feel like developer is a weird word that I don't understand or that I didn't identify with for a very long time. I was like, I'm a scrappy marketing person and an entrepreneur, and I kind of have a hospitality business, but I wasn't even like fully ready to own those. So when we were doing that process of looking at Fresh Coast and trying to figure out what our next moves were, I went and did a lot of networking. I went to a lot of real estate events, went to Arizona, went to Seattle, back to Seattle, and met with people and started to build a network. One of those people that I met was Christy Candle, and she's a real estate developer. And she kind of showed me the path and gave me a lot of insight into how we could take that next step. And without Christy, I can confidently say there's no way we would have gotten through that process of buying that property in Hancock, because commercial real estate development is very complicated when you haven't gone through it from the outside. And the average person in the world of development, they try to make it a big barrier to entry. There's a lot going on there, and there's so many nuances that can make you second guess things. There's lots of different entities that need to be evolved, regulatory bodies, not including just cities, environmental assessments, so many things that can make a project go off track. And I can say without Christy's ability to kind of step us through each of those phases, from the very moment that we were negotiating the original purchase price, we were trying to think about a financial stack that made sense. Christy helped consult on that. We became really good friends throughout that process. And as we went through the rest of due diligence with going through survey, making sure that title work was right, all of these steps that go into your residential mortgage for buying a house, which not everybody even does, right? That gets much more complicated and interesting as you get into commercial, and a lot more layers to that. So we were able to go through that process with her and start thinking at that very beginning, yes, who are the partners we need to have for this project? We need a broker. We probably need an architect. We need an engineer. We need our realtor. Like, all of those people had to come together to make it possible for us to share our vision, and to one, help us, like, we needed to formulate the vision that then we could share with them, and they could very honestly give us feedback going through that purchase process to make sure that we could accomplish what we wanted to do and do it effectively.
It has to be team. I know solo entrepreneurs and solopreneurs are a thing in some businesses, but for these levels of brick and mortar, of community orientation, of running a service-based business, bathhouses and sauna businesses are service-based businesses, you guys. And so you need to think in restaurant terms and development terms, and how do we get people through a space to have a great experience? And there's some questions coming in here that I want to kind of just start drilling into. Jacob's asking a really good one. He's saying, looking for some insight on location. I've got 2 sites ready to build, a bathhouse, saunas, and cabins. They're 25 to 35 minutes from town, so semi-remote. I think the vision and site will bring guests, but it's a risk. And then shortly after, Thomas, you're asking the same kind of question right here. Love to hear your thoughts on urban versus rural. Urban gets better access and population density for customer base. Rural gets privacy, usually lower cost customizations, but limits customer pool. I'd be interested in your take here, Lynn, because in the UP, you've literally done both. You've done as rural as it gets, the top of the Keweenaw. You guys, there is no cell service once you leave Houghton Hancock, and it is beautiful. It's amazing. And in Houghton Hancock, small town, but it's more dense there. And you're doing both. What are you seeing? What are the differences for you? And how did you sort of make those bets as it related to kind of number of people, whether draw them to the destination or build the community in the neighborhood?
Yeah, really great. I think we hit a lot of things there that were factors that just kind of worked out in our favor, right? We found a lakeside resort. People generally like going to the lake to have a vacation. That worked out. We were able to draw a large number of people, to that destination. If we had built out If we had, in our area is also very like tourist focused. So I think there's a lot of things that you need to look at if you're considering urban versus rural. Is there already things for those people to come and do? Are you adding on to something that's already going well? Are you going to be, able to invest enough to be desirable enough for people to make that extra drive? We are very rural in the fact that we do have a local airport, but we're still 4 hours from Green Bay, 2 hours, 3 hours from Marquette, technically up in the Keweenaw. And so we were learning as we went in terms of how we could attract people to the location. And we were very fortunate. We were able to do that because of that lakeside location. I think if we had bought Fresh Coast cabins in the middle of the woods in the Keweenaw, I think our attraction and our draw and our success would be a lot less because people want that water. They want the view, they want that. And we took that same idea and deployed it in our urban destination. And that I think also made a ton of difference. If you go through Takka's reviews, Takka Portage reviews, you will see almost everyone is talking about the amazing view, looking at the lift bridge, like really enjoying that picturesque moment that they could have sitting in a sauna, getting really, really warm and having this fun urban experience. And so we were able to contrast both in a way that I think worked. And I'd love to do more, right? Like if we could have come with these like deep pockets and I could have said, Justin, we want to build a bathhouse. Let's figure that out. Like we would have done that, but we also had to start scrappy, right? We had to figure that out. And that was a lot of the conversation that we relied on Justin and the team for to help figure out what that could be and what was going to make sense for that location. But I think it does differ so much depending on which location that you're going to choose, and doing a lot of that research around what else attracts people to this area. Where's the closest airport? Who are the other players that might be a resource or a partner or someone that would, consider creating or creating a trade or for like-minded experiences, right? Like sauna and cabins go really, really well together. There's also food. People need food. How could you, if you're going to have a rural destination, how could you build more of those pieces in that would be something that's going to help you be successful long-term?
Yeah, and 2 cents on that, guys who are asking, Thomas and Jacob, when you're in a rural setting, you really want to create your own gravity. You want to be a destination that's worth coming to. You need to tell that story, and you need to give them all the amenities to make that great. Like Lynn was saying, you need to say, hey, if I'm going to be here, here's all the ways I'm going to enjoy it. And if you're in an urban setting, you need to get above the noise. You need to make sure you're a spot that is worth coming to, because there are thousands of hundreds of other options to sort of spend your time on. So it's just a different challenge. And we are seeing from sort of the cedar and stone, like kind of looking throughout North America, we're seeing both happen. We're seeing both be successful. We're seeing small towns and rural destinations try things at small to upscales. We're seeing big cities do amazing, huge, high-end things. And we're seeing scrappy upstarts and guerrilla warfare moments of like, how do we start the movement from the grassroots as opposed to the top down? And I think if you're interested in those questions, and or if you're interested in these broader questions of how do I map the numbers, how do I build my business plan, how do I get through that, I do want to invite folks, as we're wrapping our time here, take a look at our Sauna Business Accelerator program. It's kind of like all the nitty gritty on that. How do you build the plan before you fund the thing, to fund the thing? And how do you make the decisions for where, how, why you're doing this idea? The ideas are working all over the country in 100 different ways. It's really a question of, what does it cost in your town? How are you going to provide it in your town? What are the ways that you're going to charge for it? And how many tourists or how many locals are coming and willing to do this kind of thing? Lynn gave you a ton of, and I want to highlight one other resource here. Lynn, thank you so much for highlighting your sort of real estate and developer background. I know that's a new title that you kind of feel weird about, but you are a tremendous local real estate developer. And Lynn sent over some details there. We sent it in the chat. We'll have it in the notes and in the script here for localrealestatedeveloper.com, your free training and registration, the power of local real estate development. Lynn, do you want to say anything about that program? That's with you and Christy. Anything in there that are sort of just sweeten it for people that they're like, what am I getting into? I want to see more and learn more from Lynn, but what is that program?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, Christy was a huge influence in our ability to do what we've done, and she has 25 years of expertise. So her and I, like silly entrepreneurs that we are, teamed up to make it possible for other people to have an experience where they could take their own project and take it from ideation to functioning business or landlord situation, depending on what you were looking for. And with that, so many questions in commercial real estate that are so nuanced. There's a couple different options. We've got a few free trainings, but we also have a mentorship. So if you've got a space that you already have purchased or you are very close to considering purchasing, that's a really great time to do the same thing that you're doing from a Sauna Business Accelerator perspective, but apply that same thinking to a commercial real estate location. Because when you have that asset, you have more in your portfolio that you're starting with from day one, higher costs, but you also, own that real estate. And as we've seen throughout the most recent years, but generally real estate tends to appreciate in value, and having that as a benefit to your business, your sauna business or other business is going to be possibly a good thing. Depends on the person, but those situations and conversations can be really unique. So we're happy to help, and that's a training that Christy and I provide. And there's a few different ways to engage there, but would be happy to welcome further conversation about that as well.
Yeah, huge recommendations of that. If you're interested, go check it out. Lynn, thank you so much for taking your time away from your day job for other businesses, your mountain of probably DMs and emails as you're running those things. And we really didn't even sort of totally get through the fact that you're opening this new event center also on the property there. So like you're in the thick of it. This is not like you did this once and you're telling people the glory days. You guys are doing this actively right now. And we have people saying, hey, this was great. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining. It's so helpful to see these things. So Lynn, I think just from our team and from everybody who's on the call, thank you so much for providing so much of your wisdom to make this happen today. We really, really appreciate it. And everybody, go visit the UP. Go hang out with Lynn and Jason and the crew up there in North. You will not be disappointed. Thanks again, Lynn.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right, everybody. So glad to have you on. Join for next month's. And if you're watching online on the recording, thank you again. Feel free to shoot us a chat or an email. We can't wait to support you in your sauna business. We'll talk to y'all soon.